Some very important college football playoff rankings this week, and the big question is going to be how far will these teams in the SEC fall? And I'm mostly talking about Alabama and Ole Miss. How far will they fall in the rankings? Do they still have a path? Do they still have a shot to get in the playoff with the 3 losses? Do they drop them so far that they really don't have a path? It's hard to project what this committee is going to do, but I'm going to give it my best shot here. I feel like I've done a pretty good job on these projections this season, but they've still done things that make no sense. Like last week, they jumped Alabama ahead of Miami for absolutely no reason. I mean, Alabama played Mercer or something like that, some FCS team. Why would they have jumped ahead of Miami by winning a game? Like, there's been things like that made no sense with these rankings. So who knows what they're going to do? But I'm going to give it my best shot here, and we'll start at the bottom, starting with 21 through 25. I think you have to put Kansas State back in the rankings. I thought they maybe should have been in there last week, but I think you have to put the Wildcats back in these rankings. They've got wins over Colorado, Tulane, and even West Virginia is a decent win. I know the losses aren't great as of late, but they got to win this past weekend. I don't see how you can put Colorado ahead of Kansas State when Kansas State beat them head-to-head, and they've got a better resume. Colorado's best wins are Baylor and Texas Tech. So to me, that's clear. Kansas State should be ahead of Colorado. I think the committee will do that. I think Illinois comes in at 23, UNLV up to 22, and Missouri at 21. So last week, I projected Missouri to stay in the rankings. People said that was crazy. I agreed with you. They shouldn't have been in the rankings, but I told you the committee was going to do that because they were going to keep as many SEC teams in there as possible, and that's exactly what we saw, and they did win this past weekend, so they should definitely be in the rankings this week. So I think that's what the bottom's going to look like. Some other teams to maybe keep an eye on. I think Syracuse, I'll show you my rankings here at the end. I think Syracuse should be ranked. How far do they drop Army? The fact that they didn't really compete at all with Notre Dame, I think they probably drop them out, but maybe they keep them in. You've got an 8-3 Duke team, a 9-2 Memphis team. There are some other teams that maybe could be considered. Would they even possibly consider a 4-loss team? That's something to watch out for as well. I don't think we're to that point, but in the final rankings, we probably will see a 4-loss team if things continue the way they've been going. Let's move on now to 16 through 20. I think Texas A&M drops to number 20. Tough loss for them on the road at Auburn. You look at the Aggies, they've got the win over Missouri. That's still going to be counted as a ranked win. I think Iowa State comes in just ahead of them because they only have 2 losses. Wins over Baylor, West Virginia, and Iowa. Those are decent wins. BYU, I think, is ahead of them. The win over SMU is still good. Even though they lost this past weekend, I don't think they dropped too much. They've also got to win over Kansas State. They've got to win over Baylor. I wouldn't say they have any bad losses. So, yeah, I think BYU sitting there at number 18. Tulane moves up to number 17. Arizona State at number 16. A big win for them over BYU. They also have the win over Kansas State. So I think that's going to be enough to get them up to number 16. And then number 15, I think it's going to be South Carolina with wins over Missouri, Texas A&M, also Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. A lot of people talking about South Carolina being in the running to be in the college football playoff as I need to skip ahead here one spot. So, yeah, there's South Carolina at 15. A lot of people talking about them being that team, that 3-loss team that could get in the playoff. But you see here ahead of them in the rankings, I think Alabama and Ole Miss will be ahead of them. They beat them head-to-head. They have the same number of losses. They have similar resumes. I don't see South Carolina being ahead of Alabama or Ole Miss, and I don't really see them getting in the playoff without a lot of chaos. They really need all these teams. They have to get ahead of all of these teams. They have to get ahead of SMU, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Clemson. Now, of course, if they beat Clemson, they should jump ahead of Clemson. But again, SMU, maybe if they lose to Miami and they get blown out in the ACC championship, they could jump ahead of them. But they're going to need Alabama to lose to Auburn and then Ole Miss to lose to Mississippi State, or someone else like Indiana lose to Purdue, something crazy like that. So South Carolina, I mean, they really need a lot of help. I don't think they have a realistic shot, at least based off of how I think the rankings are going to look. Like I said, those rankings could look a little bit different. They could surprise us, but that's where I see it right now. Clemson. So Clemson is interesting. And again, we're kind of breaking down the rankings, but also talking about these playoff scenarios. If Clemson beats South Carolina, that gives them a pretty good win, and they've only got 2 losses. Could they jump ahead of Alabama and Clemson, or and Ole Miss potentially, maybe even SMU if SMU loses. That'll be interesting. I don't think that's going to happen. I think if Alabama and Ole Miss win out or win their final games, I think they will stay ahead of Clemson, even if Clemson beats South Carolina, unless Clemson is just really, really impressive in that game. I think Clemson's best path to the playoff is to somehow get to the ACC championship. To have Miami lose, they get to the ACC championship, they win that. That's their best path because they need a lot of help to get in as an at-large. But they don't even have to beat South Carolina for that to happen to get to the ACC championship and win it. They really just need Miami to lose. So that's interesting there. Again, Clemson at 14. I think Alabama and Ole Miss drop just behind SMU, and that's going to be the thing to watch. If they stay ahead of SMU, then Alabama's still in the driver's seat. They still will make the college football playoff if they beat Auburn without, something. I guess if SMU were to win the ACC, then they would jump in, and then would Miami drop below Alabama? So I don't think Alabama's a lock if they're ahead of SMU in these rankings, but they are in great shape even with the 3 losses. So that's going to be the most interesting thing to see with these rankings. Where is Alabama, and also where's Ole Miss? Where are they in relation to SMU? If they are behind SMU, I think they're in trouble, because I think SMU, as long as they play Miami competitively, I don't know that they get penalized for playing in a conference championship game and losing when Alabama and Ole Miss are sitting at home. So I think SMU might still get in, again, unless they get blown out or something. So that is the thing to watch in these rankings. That, and also Indiana. How far does Indiana fall? So let's go to 6 through 10 here. I think Indiana's going to drop to number 10. They weren't all that competitive against Ohio State, so I think they do wind up here at number 10. You look at so my thinking here is when you compare Indiana and Boise State, they've both played the top teams, Oregon and Ohio State. Indiana kind of got blown out. Boise State played Oregon very, very tough. So I think that's going to be the difference between these two teams. I think Boise State will be ahead of Indiana. We'll see. Could be wrong, but that's what I think the committee's going to do. I think clearly Tennessee's at 8, Georgia's at 7, Miami's at 6. That one seems pretty obvious. There's really, nothing happened with Georgia and Tennessee that would make you think that they should jump ahead of Miami, at least based off where the committee had them ranked before. And so I think that's probably the way that it looks. And I think that's going to be 6 through 10. So let's go to the top 5 now. And I think it's pretty clear here. Notre Dame should be 5, Penn State 4, Texas 3, Ohio State 2, and Oregon 1. I don't really see any argument to change these rankings unless you wanted to move Georgia up, which I'm going to show you my rankings. I'm pretty high on Georgia. I think they should be ranked in the top 5. And again, I'll show you that in just a second. Georgia has a road win over Texas, the top 5 team. They have a win over Clemson, top 15 team, a win over Tennessee, top 10 team. There are no teams in the country that have 3 better wins than those 3 wins. They absolutely have the 3 best wins in all of college football. It's really not even close. And you look at their losses, they did come on the road. Ole Miss, very good team, lost to them on the road. That was a tough loss, yes, but I wouldn't call it a blowout. It wasn't super competitive, but I wouldn't call it a blowout. And then their other loss coming to Alabama. So we're talking about 2 top 15 teams, both on the road. The Alabama game, they had a chance to win. They came from behind, had a chance to win. So I think Georgia should be higher. But I think the committee is going to go this route based off of what they've done so far. And I'll just go ahead and show you my rankings here. So I've actually got Georgia at number 3. I've got the Bulldogs there sitting at number 3. I think that, again, when you look at their resume and who they've played, they deserve to be there with those wins. No one else has played 5 games like that. And would any of these other teams go 3-2 in those 5 games? I don't know. I'd probably not. Maybe Oregon or Ohio State, but I don't think Notre Dame would go 3-2 against Georgia's best opponents. I really don't think Penn State would. So that's how I think it should look. I think you got Oregon, Ohio State, then Georgia, Notre Dame, Penn State, and Texas. Again, their resumes are lacking. Committee likes those 2 teams, but they really haven't beaten anyone. Then I'd go Tennessee, SMU, Indiana, Miami, Boise State, Ole Miss. Then I go Alabama, South Carolina. So the reasoning I think Ole Miss should actually be ahead of Alabama is when you look at Ole Miss's losses, they were all like on the final play. And I know a couple of teams that aren't even ranked that they lost to, but still, they were very, very close in those games. Vanderbilt I mean, they beat Alabama. They look like the better team in that game, and Oklahoma just dominated Alabama. So I'd put Ole Miss ahead of Alabama, even though Alabama does have the better wins if you look at all their total wins. Then I'd go South Carolina, Arizona State, BYU, Clemson, Kansas State, Iowa State, Texas A&M, Syracuse. So yeah, I've got Syracuse in the rankings. They've got some good wins. Illinois, UNLV, Missouri, and Colorado. That is how I would rank the teams based off of the resumes and following the committee's criteria. Again, if you do that, I think the rankings should look like this. But again, I don't think that's what they're going to look like. Would love to get your thoughts on the rankings. Give me your comments. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with my projections? What do you think that big surprise could be this week? Again, like I said, where does Indiana fall? Where do Alabama and Ole Miss fall, specifically as it relates to SMU? Those are the two things to watch with these rankings coming up on Tuesday night.